Hello, I am Peter Quintana, and welcome to Season 6 of Finding Your North Star, the HGKC podcast series, where we talk to business owners and leaders about what keeps them awake and what drives them. Season 6 is subtitled Strong Foundations, and we're inviting each guest to interpret the topic in relation to their expertise, business or sector. Today, I'm really excited to be speaking to Andy and Tim Fussell, third-generation farmers and owners of Fussell's Fine Foods, who since 2010 have pioneered the use of cold-pressed virgin rapeseed oil in the UK as an alternative to olive oil. So welcome, Andy and Tim. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you both today.
Pleasure to speak to you, Peter.
Hello, Peter. Hello.
I'd like to open with a question for you, Andy, please, if I may. Fussell's Farms has always been a family-driven business, with three generations having worked on the farm over a span of nearly 60 years, as I understand it. What made you decide to start producing your own brand of rapeseed oil?
Well, if I'm honest, it's to do with a need rather than bigger. That was the biggest thing. The oilseed rape was making up at the time, well, and still today, a very major part of the rotation that I'd implemented in the way the farm ran. It has a particularly relevant place in the rotation because of the earliness of the planting of it and the earliness of cutting it. So, but like all crops, you have to have a crop, if you like, that is viable and creates an income which has a margin of profit which is relevant to what we're doing. So, which was fine back in 2003-4, when the price of oilseed rape was about 160 to 180 pounds a tonne. But market forces, things that were going on in the world at that time, drove the price of oilseed rape back to 100 pounds a tonne, which was in those days a massive drop for a commodity on the market. And we have seen, I'll give you an idea of that. What we've seen in the last 18 months to 2 years with the price of oilseed rape with the Ukraine war is a massive hike. And we see that on a lot of crops nowadays. But back in the day, to have a 60 or 80 pound loss or drop in the market value of a crop is almost catastrophic. And that's how I viewed it. So it gave me no choice. I couldn't grow it commercially and supply it at that money. So the idea was, and the decision to keep the crop in the rotation, I had to think of something else to do with the seed once we cut it. And the idea was create your own market and try and add value to something a crop that I couldn't get the right value from if I'd sold it on the open market into the trade. So I run trucks as well. So the idea originally was that I would create a fuel, if you like, a biofuel from the pressing of the oil. But that didn't work with regards to the tax on producing your frontline oil. So culinary oil was the way to go. When we worked the economics out of it, it ticked the boxes. Right. So it was forced, really, rather than, it made the decision quite easily for us.
Yeah, so purely commercial decision to begin with. But I also know from the conversations that we've had that you've got this farm to plate vision, showing, if you like, the end consumer part of that process. And that has, maybe that's evolved since you started producing the culinary oil, but that's quite key for you as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that was, at the time, back then, it was a decision to try and keep the crop in the rotation because it suited the way we were farming and the farm land, a soil, if you like, that we have. So what's come through later was very much what you've just said about the sustainability and the ability to show people that actually we had an oil in this country that was equivalent of a Mediterranean culinary oil, and in certain areas actually better for you and more versatile. So it led, I suppose, to being able to show people what was available outside their back door, and they could actually touch it, see it, and quite happily then when we converted it into oil, they could eat it and know exactly where their food had come from. We've built on that since we've been up at the new yard, because we created a cookery theatre there, which we do farm tours and premises or facility tours, if you like. Well, you've been on one, you know all about that. Yeah. But it gives us a chance to display right from growing it in a field back to pressing it into the oil in a bottle with a label on it. As you leave, buy some. So it does do that, yeah, and it's got more and more important, because that's the way food has been, if you like, sold, on the back of the fact local, identifiable, sustainable food is what people should be looking at.
Yeah, and I did visit. And can I bring Tim in? Because when I visited, and particularly that you guided us around the production facility itself, you talked a lot about how the process and the machinery evolved as you tried things out to see what worked. And I know that you built much of what I saw yourself, didn't you, Tim? You have a pretty efficient operation there now, but were there occasions when you wondered if you would ever get to the level it is today?
Well, do you know what, Peter? Sometimes I wonder if we've got there at all. You know, we do try and make it as efficient as possible, and it's a system that can run on its own now, which is lovely. I can set it up and run it, and it can run 24 hours a day, and it just needs to be monitored. But you're right. You know, when we set it up, it was a huge advance from what we had previously. And I can remember buying all the equipment. We bought the equipment from a fellow in Yorkshire, a fellow called Peter Rhodes Feed Services. And we bought a new press, and we bought this 3-stage filtration system, which was quite ahead of its time, really, in those days. And so we bought all this equipment. I said to Peter, I was slightly troubled about how it was all going to go together. So I said, Peter, it's all very well. We've got the press, and we've got this 3-stage cleaning system, and we've got a crude tank and all the rest of it. But how do we put it all together? He said, it's easy, Tim. All you need is 30 meters of 2-inch braided steel water pipe, and then you fix it all together and you're fine. So I said, well, where am I going to get this pipe from, Peter? And he goes, well, there'll be somebody down your way who will supply the 2-inch braided steel water pipe. So anyway, I found somebody in Radstock, and I went to see him, and he said, yeah, sure, no problem, we can supply them. Are you sure that's what you need? But of course, as you go through these things occur that you had no idea that were going to happen. And buying steel water pipe is a little bit like going to buy a coffee. Back in the old days, people would say, do you want black or white? Do you want sugar? Now, if you go and buy a coffee, the choice is endless. You can have a cappuccino, a macchiato, a latte, a mocha, it goes on and on. Hazelnuts, caramel, vanilla, blah, blah, blah. Now, when you wouldn't believe it, but when you buy steel pipe, it's exactly the same. So I go in, and he says, what kind of steel pipe would you like? Would you like black steel, red steel, orange steel, stainless steel, galvanized steel? And the list went on. But as soon as I heard galvanized, I thought, that's what I need, galvanized pipe. That's what Peter told me, galvanized pipe. So off I went, and I bought 30 meters of 2-inch braided steel galvanized pipe. I went to Sydenham's in Frome and got this very fancy machine that cut the pipe and threaded it and everything else. And I got into this project, and I'd never done anything like this before. So it was a bit of it was a steep learning curve. But I started putting it all together. Anyway, the phone goes, and it's Peter Rhodes, and he goes, how are you getting on, Tim? I said, well, I'm nearly there, Peter, I'm nearly there. He said, you finished? I said, well, not yet. He said, well, I've got Klaus Hergersheimer coming from Germany, who's going to come and commission the press. And I said, Peter, I'm not ready for him. He says, well, he's coming. He's only going to be in England for 48 hours, and he's coming to see you. So I said, all right then, okay. So about 5 minutes later, through the door walks this 7-foot-tall German man, and who doesn't speak a lot of English. And he looks at me, and I'm up on that platform where you saw us, where I'm putting all the pipes together with the cleaning system and everything else. And he looks across, and he goes, aha, nice pipes, like this, you see. And I felt very important. I thought everything was going exceedingly well. And then he sort of did this double take, when in the cartoons they flick their head twice and look back to the same position. And he goes, the oil is for horses. And I could feel then that something was going to be wrong. And I said, no. This is the finest cooking oil that anybody can buy. This is the finest chefs in the country are using this cooking oil. This is marvelous. And he looked again and he goes, galvanized pipes, you kill people. And I thought, oh my goodness gracious me, what is going on? But when you know deep down that you're wrong. And you have to start, climbing your way out of this tunnel. So I phoned up Peter Rhodes. I said, Peter, he said, are you all right? How's everything going? I said, well, I've got a bit of a problem. I said, those galvanized pipes you told me to buy? And he goes, I never told you to buy galvanized pipes, Tim. He said, did you know galvanized pipes can kill people? I said, I do now. Anyway, and you've heard this story. This is the second time you've heard this story, and it's still making you chuckle. But the point
it's still
was,
funny, yes.
the point was, we were in such a rush to get going. The press has been out of commission for 6 months. I'd used up all our stock of oil. We were pushed, to get this new piece of equipment going. And I'd never done anything like that before. And I had assumed that the galvanized pipes were what we needed. Now, of course, what I then found out was, when you galvanize pipes, you coat them in zinc on the outside and on the inside.
Yeah.
What happens is the zinc reacts with the oil. It oxidizes the oil. Now, I wouldn't say it would kill you straight away, but we would have gone out of business rather quickly. And that would have been 10 years of hard work down the drain. But I think the point, there was a couple of things. Firstly, I was determined that I wasn't ready for Klaus Hergesheimer to come and commission the press. And if he hadn't, then I would have completed the process and built the system with galvanized pipes. So God knows what would have happened then. But also the fact that I hadn't done enough due diligence, I hadn't done enough research, but there was also a possibility to make it right, So the point is, if something happens, if you have this massive problem, there is always a way out. There will always be a way through. And I was able to go back to the people who had supplied the pipes. I was able to then do a little bit more research and then make sure that I had the right equipment for the job. And then it gave me the confidence, actually. It gave me the confidence to put it all together and to complete it. And as a consequence, 7 years later, it's still a very, very robust system, which working right now, Peter. It's working right now as we speak, and it will be on all night tonight. So yes is the answer to your question.
It's interesting you use that word confidence, because we've been talking about that quite a lot in HGKC over the last few weeks, about what is it that a business owner needs to be able to navigate all of these scenarios, situations they find themselves in, just like the one that you found yourself in. And that confidence is not confident that you know what it is that you've got to do, but the confidence to be corrected, to ask questions. And that helps you then to take that next step, and you wind up 7 years later with a very effective, very efficient production facility, effectively, haven't you?
Well, you know what they say, Peter, there's no such thing as a stupid question.
Exactly.
It's just a stupid answer.
Yes.
And I think you have to be prepared, even when you feel that you've got a little bit of experience behind you, you're a little bit older and all the rest of it. You've got to be prepared for somebody to question you and to take you to task. And then there's lots of other things. And one of the things I find myself saying is, well, we've always done it that way.
Mm.
And as soon as you hear yourself saying, well, we've always done it that way, maybe it's time to have a look at your process or your system and go, can we make it better? Can we change it? Can we do something different? And not being afraid to ask yourself those questions as well, I think.
I've been asked plenty of stupid questions.
Yes.
I've asked plenty of stupid questions, Peter. We come across quite a few stupid questions, actually.
Yes.
I think you're right. No such thing as a stupid question, but there are often stupid answers. But confidence is about having the confidence to do some research and to test and learn. And testing and learning, I think, is
and don't
really
feel
important.
worried about that, because often the person you're asking the question to, 9 times out of 10, they might know the answer, but they might have been in that situation of asking that very same question themselves anyway.
Yeah.
You know, don't be afraid or worried about doing that.
We do that in all the other branches. There's a lot of young lads that I have as apprentices on the other side of the businesses. And the biggest thing I tell them, Peter, is do never be afraid to ask a question. Whether it is a possible stupid one, or maybe it's a stupid answer that they get. But they mustn't, and no one must be afraid of asking a question and questioning what you do. So
Yeah. Can I bring you back in then, Andy? I mean, when we were talking about putting this podcast together, you mentioned that your grandfather used to run a brewery, Fussell's Beer. I would have liked to have tried that a long time ago, I guess now. But having a product that bears the Fussell's brand is important to you, isn't it?
massively, yeah, massively. The village of Road was at one stage synonymous with a Fussell's brand.
Yeah.
Back in the 30s, even earlier than that, back at the turn of the century, even there was Fussell's Beer. Fussell's, there was a bakery. He was a seed merchant, a corn merchant. So there's always been that presence of the name in the village and in the area. And the beer was sort of the icing on the top of the cake with regards to a Fussell's brand. I mean, grandfather, there's 9 of them in the family, but they had 78 pubs and hotels and stretched from Reading down to Bridgewater. So,
Wow.
So it was an enormous setup. I don't know, 125 employees within Road. He built houses in Road for his major employees. A family lived in Road. So yeah, so the opportunity to create a brand, and although we put oil in a bottle, not alcoholic material, we have often been asked, would you go back to brewing in Road and creating that? So it's important to us, yes. And I think all good brands have a link to a personal side, especially, yes. I'll say small brands. I don't think Centrica would be that important a brand for a village, but for us, it gives a place, and we want that with the tours. We want someone to recognise when they hear of our area that Fussell's is the brand that thrives there.
Yeah, we talk about strong brands. Strong brands have a personal connection, often linked to a story.
Yeah,
and I think that's what makes Fussell's a strong brand. Whereas Centrica, I would say, is not a brand at all. It's just the name of a company.
The name of a company, and again, if you look at the branding, the original branding that we came up, I wanted something that was, shall we say, with like Robinson's Jam in mind, in that it was something that gave an identity with the little chap on the front. We can't mention his name anymore, but Robinsons were synonymous with that little chap, and it seemed appropriate that I wore overalls and a cap most of the time, and dungaree overalls at the best of times. So I wanted something that was relatable and visible, and then it gave that farmer interpretation. Unfortunately, it looked like a mechanic to start with, but the cheeky little chap who looked very young and attractive is still there, Peter. And
yes,
I think grandfather would look back and he'd go, well done, you've had a good old crack at it, and the name is still vibrant within this part of the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you go into if you go into a shop, and we get plenty of that from people all over the Southwest that send photographs and of the bottles in shops, and it's a I have to say, it's a very pleasurable experience.
Yeah. You also said to me, I remember you saying to me that you've become so linked to Rapeseed Oil, or the name Fussell's has become so linked to Rapeseed Oil, that people who have possibly bought another brand still think that they've bought your Rapeseed Oil. That's pretty extraordinary. That's real testimony.
We like that one.
Well, we like that. We have a lot of people say, oh yes, I've used your stuff before. I've bought it in Waitrose in Crewkerne. And we know fine well that we're actually not in Waitrose in Crewkerne. And they go, no, I bought your honey dressing in Sainsbury's in Exeter. And you know that we haven't got a specific honey dressing, and you know that we're not in Exeter. And you go, oh yes, lovely, thank you very much. so that the power of the brand, and this is something we learned in the early days.
Yes,
it has to be about the brand.
Yes,
and the story associated with it. Of course.
Yeah, I met you both on a tour. Tim, you staged the kitchen theatre that day, and I remember you cooking all sorts of things with quite a lot of rapeseed oil, if memory serves me correctly, which is very, very delicious. But it has become a pretty extraordinary experience, isn't it? Do you enjoy that side of what you do?
Yeah, we do actually, and I think it gives us an opportunity to tell the story, but also explain. And it's not just, we don't just talk about rapeseed. We talk about how rapeseed is involved in the whole of agriculture as a whole piece. To try and help people understand where their food comes from, but also to try and help people understand that arable farmers work with dairy farmers, work with sheep farmers, work with across the board. We all have to work together. It's not just about one crop that grows in the field. So it's a much bigger piece. But the opportunity to do the tours was a way to show people how something that grows in the field then appears on your plate, and that whole process in between. And the things that we had to learn, because beforehand, as farmers, we knew how to grow the stuff. Once we'd grown it and harvested it, it was gone, it was sold. So we weren't participating in anything after that. So now, to go through the whole system and understand how you create the product, and then creating the product, the different products that we make, learning how to make them, learning all the information, the testing, all the rest of it, the labels, the kind of bottles, the caps, the machines that have to cope with all that, then the audit process that goes with it. So in explaining that to people, they get a much bigger picture of what goes on. And it just gives us an opportunity to share that information with them. And we like to say, Peter, that we educate, inform, and entertain. There we are. Because we do like to put a little bit of theatre into it, Peter, as you've done.
Yes, you most certainly did, actually. Yes, absolutely. It was a memorable experience, I have to say.
We've found our niche in talking.
Well, that's it. That's for sure. I want to just talk a little bit about sustainability, because again, sustainability came up quite a bit on the tour that I was on, and I know that's important to you. So, Andy, how you run the farm? How's farming changed over the years, and has it all been for the good, do you think?
It's definitely all for the good. Yeah, I mean, sustainability is the big word. It's the buzzword, if you like. And a lot of buzzwords go and they come and they go and they come and they go, and you go on and they repeat themselves, because some of the things we did or looking at now with direct drilling, we did that in the 70s. But the technology has advanced. So therefore, within advancing technology, you can revisit certain ways of doing things in farming, and now they are much more viable and much more in their own right sustainable. We didn't think too much in the 70s about saving fuel or how many times we went over the land. Sustainability for me is more about looking after the topsoil and the soil which I grow crops in, and making them more efficient. Again, that goes hand in hand with sustainability. But efficiency is probably just as important, or if you can equate them back to sustainability, it's the fact that the less you use a machine, the longer it lasts. Again, that's sustainable, but it's also efficient on the pocket.
Yeah.
Farmers, as you know, and everybody will know who's listening to this, Peter, that farmers tend to have very deep pockets and very short arms. Yeah. And so therefore they don't like spending money if they can possibly get away with it.
Yeah.
So that is another way I look at things. If I can save with regards to diesel, that is better for the environment. If I can save on soil disturbance and loss of moisture, and therefore the erosion of the topsoil, again, it's a sustainable way of farming. We don't plough as a rule, as like we used to do plough every year. We only plough probably once every 7 years. So that maintains the carbon structure in the soil.
Yeah.
Nobody, Peter, in the 70s had really heard much about carbon reserves within the soil.
No.
It was there, the scientists did, but us as farmers were quite happy to create a seed bed. So more important than what we were actually doing to the soil was to create the seed bed. And so therefore everything would grow, and therefore everything would be more profitable. Fertilizer is another one. We tend to try and use less fertilizer. We try to be more accurate with it. You have GPS on all the kit. We are accurate to 2 centimeters from satellites that are 7 to 8 miles up in the air, whizzing round. Again, it saves on time, man hours, diesel, the stress on the tractor, the stress on the man. We grow maize in the rotation so that we put farmyard manure back in, and we regenerate. I don't class myself as a regenerative farmer, but we are certainly doing some of those practices. And that is good for the environment, but it's also good for the pocket. So efficiency also comes hand in hand with the buzzword sustainability.
Yeah. I mean, they're interlinked, are they? You couldn't be sustainable without being efficient. And if you're sustainable and efficient, then that ticks all of those.
Yeah, it does.
And doesn't it?
It's important. It's a way forward. And I think now it's stuck with the climate. We can't deny climate change. It's not probably completely down to the farmer, and dare I say it, a farting cow. But I suggest that more efficient airplanes would be much better for the environment than letting a cow out on the ground and trying to keep its carbon back in its backside. But like everything, it's a balance, isn't it? You know.
Yes.
We've gone about a balanced diet.
Yeah.
You can add the oil into that one, you know.
Yeah.
And being sustainable is producing something on your farm that people can eat, so there's no carbon footprint with regards to the mileage that we have to do to get it to the shops. So there's lots of stuff in there, but yes, the word is a good word.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I can't imagine anybody listening to this would disagree with that either. I've got one last question. Time is getting on, and this one's for you, Tim. And that is, why is there only one L in Fussell's Fine Foods?
Well, that's a really good question.
How long have you got,
I'll
Peter?
try and make it as brief as
How long have you got, Peter?
Well, we had one of our elderly relatives came in not so long ago, well, pre-COVID. She was on one of the tours, came in to the kitchen. Rosemary, she's married to my father's cousin, and she came in for this tour, and she came storming into the kitchen. And she says, I need a word with you two. What on earth have you done with the L? And we said, steady on, Rosemary, let me explain. So anyway, when we first started, when we were going through the preparations for this, maybe 2006, 2007, something like that, we began to come up with the idea of the brand and everything else. But clearly it was, we started with a capital F-U-S-S-E-L-L-S. And we submitted this for it to be trademarked and copywritten and to protect our intellectual property and all of that kind of stuff. So anyway, after a period of time, if you don't hear anything, you can assume that you can go ahead and use that name or your whatever name it is for your brand and go ahead with it. Anyway, 24 hours before the cutoff point, we get a letter from a lawyer in Switzerland, in Lausanne, to be more specific. And the letter went a little something like this. Dear Mr. Fussell, we're very noticed that you have submitted your brand name, Fussell's. I'm afraid I have to tell you that you cannot use that as we own the brand. And the letter was from Nestle. So Lausanne in Switzerland.
Only a small company.
A small global dominated. And Andrew got a little bit cross with this. And I can remember him, he slammed his fist down on the table and he said, get Frank on the phone. Now, Frank is the family solicitor. He said, get Frank on the phone. We need to sue him. So
we're going to fight.
We're fighting. And I'm very familiar with Nestle and Lausanne because I used to live on the other side of Lake Geneva, on the Evian side of Lake Geneva. And my wife used to work in an international school just around the corner from Lausanne, and loads of the kids were from employees of Nestle. So I was very familiar. I said, Andrew, Nestle is possibly one of the largest companies in the world. I don't think we have much of a chance of taking them on.
But he did say, we'll see if there's a deal to be done.
So we did have a little look at it. And the reason was that they owned Fussell's Condensed Milk. Okay, right. So some people will remember there was a brand in the 70s and 80s, Fussell's Condensed Milk, which was F-U-S-S-E-L-L-S. And a lot of people still today say, are you related to the condensed milk?
Can we have some milk?
Can we have some milk? And of course we weren't, and it had nothing to do with us. However, Nestle owned the brand. It was a dormant brand, but they still considered us to be a threat, which I suppose was a compliment in some way.
Massive compliment.
But we were able to negotiate our way to lowercase and one L. So therefore, that is the reason why we only have one L in the brand name.
It was quite surprising that we could keep Fussell's, but we had to drop the
L,
the uppercase F and drop an L. So it's very, 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 very similar.
Hmm.
They were, and it is. They were happy. So
It sounds the same, but of course it is a very, very different product, and the brand would look very different, won't it? So,
of course.
Oh,
but
yeah,
I think had the condensed milk still been available,
we might have been.
we might have been, there might have been something for them to say. But because it was no longer available, we just found it. Because these days now you see it all the time with big companies protecting their brand, and you understand why that has to happen. But anyway, it makes a good story, Peter. We came out of it well, and the amount of times we have told people about our missing L will go down in history.
And so much
Yes,
so, Peter, that we've got people that are part of the family, and as in we've known them since school, and they've been sending us cards for 35 years. And now they think they've been sending cards for 35 years to the people with the wrong name.
Yeah.
So people we went to school with that we spent probably 10 years of our lives at, and masters that we were, cricket teams, you name it. Now, when they send us something in a post, or we get an email or whatever it is, they think they've been getting it wrong. So we are Fussell now with one L.
well, that's an extraordinary comment on the strength of that brand, isn't it? That it's now changed the name of your family. Your family name.
Suddenly, it's turned long-term friend. I mean, I'm not kidding. College, all my college, they think it's one L, and yet they know perfectly well that we're double L.
Yeah, extraordinary. Well, I'm sure we could have that conversation for a lot longer, but that seems to be a good place on which to end this conversation. So remains for me to thank you both for joining us. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. I would urge listeners to visit Fussell's Fine Foods website. That's www.fusselsfinefoods.co.uk. And remember, it's only one L, where you'll find the whole range of delicious products available to buy online. Some mouth-watering recipes, I think, from Tim there to try, and details of how to book a tour of the production facility, which I have to say is absolutely fascinating and well worth seeing. And if you are ever near Road in Somerset, Church Farm is just off the A36, and there's a shop on site that sells all Fussell's rapeseed oil products and a range of other food products as well. So do drop in. And if you'd like to find out more about HGKC, you can find us at www.hgkc.co.uk, where you'll be able to read more about how we help our clients develop their confidence to lead with empathy, to innovate in times of uncertainty, and to build value in their business in preparation for their exit. And you can also listen to more of our Finding Your North Star podcast, which you'll also find on Buzzsprout and Spotify, and explore and download some of our favorite cool tools. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Tim and Andy, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.